Carter tonight reporting that the Uranium One informant met with congressional staffers and gave explosive testimony about a Russian criminal enterprise operating right inside the United States. This is before the Uranium One deal. Now, Sara Carter will join us along with the informant's lawyer, Victoria Tunsing. But first, we get to tonight's breaking news opening monologue. All right, brand new tonight, we have even more text messages from Trump-hating FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Now, Senator Ron Johnson has put out a report that is raising questions about President Obama's potential involvement in Hillary Clinton's email investigation. Now, during a September 2nd, 2016 exchange about creating talking points for former FBI Director James Comey to give to President Barack Obama, Page writes, POTUS wants to know everything we are doing. All right, so what exactly did President Obama want to be briefed on? Now, sources close to Strzok and Page, they're telling the Wall Street Journal tonight that this message they sent doesn't have to do with the Clinton email probe and instead was talking about possible Russian interference in the election. So, in light of the new Strzok text, well, we need to know what investigation did Obama want to be briefed on? It's why tonight we have two very simple questions for Barack Obama and, frankly, everyone else involved in this scandal. Take a quick look.
What did the president know and when did he know it?
All right, that was Senator Howard Baker. That was during the Watergate investigation, asking very important questions that President Barack Obama and others now need answers to. They got to answer to everybody. We did reach out to Obama's spokesperson. We didn't get a comment from all of them. And by the way, shocking. Also tonight, there's a new batch of text messages that was just released from the Trump-hating FBI lovers, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. It highlights their investigative bias and, of course, their continued hatred of Donald Trump. On August 9th, 2016, Lisa Page writes, well, he's not ever going to become president, right? Right? Now, their hatred for Trump only grows from there. On November 3rd, 2016, only days before the election, Page wrote, well, the New York Times probability numbers are dropping every single day. I'm scared for our organization. Now, the Senate report notes this is likely a reference to the New York Times election forecast, which showed Trump gaining ground at that point in the election. Then on Election Day, November 8th, 2016, Strzok then says, oh, my God, this is blanking terrifying. And the next day, Strzok follows up with a, oh, my God, I am so depressed. And a few days later, on November 13th, here's what Lisa Page texts. Pay close attention to this. Well, I bought all the president's men. I figured I needed to brush up on Watergate. And the following day, Page writes, God, being here makes me angry. Lots of highfalutin national security talk. And meanwhile, we have our task ahead of us. OK, what task are they talking about? Now, Strzok and Page also called Trump an idiot, lonesome human being, talked about their insurance policy in case he won. So clearly they were abusively biased towards now President Donald Trump. And here's what's very important. Peter Strzok, and to an extent Lisa Page, who was Andrew McCabe's legal counsel, they're at the center of everything in all of this. Now, Strzok was a former top intelligence official at the FBI and signed the documents, remember, to start the Russia investigation. And Strzok also played a key role in the Clinton investigation, even interviewing Hillary and helping James Comey write that exoneration months before the investigation. And, of course, by overseeing the interviews of not only Clinton, but also General Flynn. And by the way, he's the one guy who helped put the fix in, one of a couple. And that allowed Hillary Clinton to remain in this presidential race. Otherwise, very likely, if it was a fair investigation, she probably would have been indicted. And a new text message proves that on September 28, 2016, Strzok says, got called up to Andy's earlier, who we think is Andrew McCabe, hundreds of thousands of emails turned over by Weiner's attorney to the SDNY, the Southern District of New York, includes a ton of material from Spouse. That means Uma Abedin sending team up tomorrow to review. This will never end. Here's why this is important. According to reports, what's in the upcoming DOJ Inspector General report we expect next month is what caused Andrew McCabe to abruptly resign at the end of last month. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the FBI officials, top officials, including McCabe, they knew about Uma Abedin's emails that were found on Anthony Weiner's laptop in September of 2016, but they waited for at least a month before alerting Congress. Now, that text message provides very key proof that's showing that Comey, McCabe, and others, they literally sat at a crucial moment on Huma Abedin's emails that were discovered on Anthony Weiner's laptop. Now, the question is why? And what took them so long to notify Congress, which they should have done? Now, the IG report is due out in the spring, probably in March, and hopefully those questions will be answered. Now, there are also other text messages from Strzok and Page that are raising a lot of red flags tonight. On May the 19th, 2 days after Robert Mueller was named the special counsel, Strzok was talking about joining the investigation with Mueller, and Strzok asked Page this question: an investigation leading to impeachment? Why are they talking about impeachment? Now, keep in mind, during that same text exchange on May 19th, 2 days after Robert Mueller was named special counsel, Strzok says, well, you and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there, no question. I hesitate in part because of my gut sense and concern that there's no big there. So Strzok knew from the start that Mueller would be carrying out a witch hunt pretty much. There's also new revelations about former Attorney General Loretta Lynch and her involvement in the Clinton email cover-up. In June 2016, Bill Clinton infamously, remember, meets with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac in Phoenix for 40 minutes, which caused Lynch to say on July 1st she's stepping away for the investigation and she would just accept the FBI's conclusion. Now, keep in mind, all of this is before Hillary Clinton was ever interviewed by the FBI. So after Lynch's statement that she was taking a back seat, she would go along with the FBI, and James Comey, the same guy that she said, don't call it an investigation, call it a matter, Strzok then writes to Page, oh, timing looks like hell. And Page replies, yeah, that's awful timing. And then Page later adds, it's a real profile in courage since she, Loretta Lynch, knows no charges will be brought. By the way, they hadn't interviewed Hillary yet. And 4 days later, Comey holds his press conference right after they interviewed Clinton, and that was Strzok's interview, and they let Clinton off the hook. So Page, Strzok, Lynch, Comey all knew that Clinton wouldn't be charged, and the Obama administration, in fact, was rigging it, and the fix was in. All right. Also tonight, even more evidence that the FBI lied to a FISA court using that Clinton bought and paid for dossier to spy on the Trump campaign. Now, last night we explained in depth about the unredacted details in the Grassley-Graham memo. Here are the highlights if you weren't with us. Now, the phony dossier, in fact, did make up the bulk of that FISA application. And in March of 2017, James Comey, he briefed Congress that the FBI used the dossier in a FISA application because they thought Christopher Steele was credible. So Comey, he just trusted Steele. Why bother verifying it? He didn't. Now, the FBI only vaguely referenced the dossier's political origins to the FISA court. So what they were doing was hiding the fact. They didn't tell the FISA court judge in their application that that dossier that they didn't verify was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton. Now, the senators also accused Steele of materially misleading the FBI. Now, Steele was working on a second dossier. Remember, we told you last night, and he, in part, this takes the cake, was being fed information from the Obama State Department and Clinton cronies, Clinton associates. Wow. So they're giving, literally, Clinton's friends are giving Steele some of the information he's using in that phony dossier, but the rest of the information came from the Russian government. Remember? He was saying the government was the source for the phony dossier material. Now, Steele was briefing several mainstream media outlets, these lies and propaganda, in the summer and fall of 2016 about his first fake news dossier. And according to British court records, Steele talked to reporters, let's see, from the New York Times, Fake News, Washington Post, Yahoo News, New Yorker, and, of course, the whole network, Fake News, CNN, at the end of September 2016 about the dossier. And we previously uncovered that Fusion GPS co-founder, remember Glenn Simpson, he actually testified to a congressional committee that the Clinton campaign and the DNC were very aware that his company was contacting media outlets. They were coordinating, in other words, about the dossier, coordinating their efforts to leak these Russian lies. And also remember, the Senate report says the dossier, as we told you last night, full of information from the Russian government. Wow, there really is a Russia collusion story. Hillary, Russia collusion. Then, of course, there's the Republican House Intelligence Committee memo. Remember the highlights from that document. The former Deputy FBI Director, Andrew McCabe, revealed to Congress, without that dossier, the FISA warrant to surveil would never have been approved. Now, the FISA judge was, in fact, in this particular case, never notified that the dossier was bought and paid for, again, by the Hillary Clinton and the DNC, funneled through the same law firm, which, of course, is a huge problem. And we also know that James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates, Dana Bente, and Rod Rosenstein all approved surveilling in this particular case. Now, the FBI also used the Yahoo News article written by Michael Isikoff about the Carter trip to Russia. They were using it as separate and independent source to corroborate the phony dossier before the FISA judge, except the source for the Yahoo story was, of course, Christopher Steele. So the FBI never actually corroborated the information because Steele was the source of the dossier and the fake news story by Michael Isikoff. And we also know that no one ever verified what was in the dossier. And, of course, the memo shows that Steele was, suspended and terminated as an FBI source for leaking to the press. Demoted DOJ official Bruce Orr had a close relationship with Steele. And remember, Orr is the guy who had an office 4 doors down from the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who would later appoint Robert Mueller. And Orr's wife, Nellie, want to talk about just coincidences in life? Oh, Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS, specifically working on the anti-Trump opposition research. And Bruce Orr said that Steele said, quote, he was desperate, the author of the dossier, desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. And finally tonight, the memo finds that during the first FISA application for that warrant, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in, quote, its infancy stage. They never verified the Russian paid-for lies by Hillary and the DNC. So the FBI lied to a FISA court judge. They used a dossier full of Russian lies to spy on the Trump campaign just before an important American election. And America's powerful tools of intelligence were weaponized to spy on an opposition campaign during an election year. Now, the key people involved need to explain themselves. Here with reaction tonight, we welcome back to the program former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGeneva, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. All right, Joe, it's a lot to absorb, a lot of information, but it's so telling and sad that this could happen in the United States of America. Give us your general takeaways from the new information today.
This is now piling on in a very big way. We are headed toward a very sad ending for the FBI and senior DOJ officials. McCabe is gone because Wray knows what's in the other emails and the other text. McCabe was sent packing as a result of Christopher Wray being briefed by a number of people who have access to the investigation that's underway, which is going to lead to criminal charges against a number of people. What you are seeing coming out now in the text messages is just the minimum of what is available now to DOJ officials as they watch, sadly. Who do you think is going
to get charged, Joe? I don't mean to interrupt, but who are we talking about?
I believe that several high FBI officials will be charged criminally, and it is conceivable that some DOJ people will also be charged criminally.
What about James Comey?
I can't answer that question because too much of the information about Comey is filtered through other people. It is clear, though, that at the time prior to the election and subsequent to the election, there were a group of people inside the FBI at the senior levels on the 7th floor who decided that they were going to protect Hillary Clinton. They were going to change 302s, and they were going to make sure that she was
testimonies. Explain.
They were going to change 302 interview notes. They were going to exonerate Hillary, and they were going to frame Donald Trump. It is inescapable, no matter what all these people are saying at the New York Times and the Washington Post with their silly editorials. They are missing one of the great corruption stories of American law enforcement, and sad to say, it involves the senior levels of the FBI, and it is a national disgrace.
One of or the biggest?
I would consider this the largest law enforcement scandal in history for this reason. The activities of McCabe and others, and Bruce Orr and others, were designed to subvert the Constitution and a national election, the most serious offense under our Constitution.
Greg Jarrett, let's start with the new struck page text that we have out today. And we're still missing the 5 crucial months, although they have been recovered. We have a lot more coming. There's 50,000 in total. So with each new revelation, it gets worse and worse for them.
It surely does. And one can bicker about the meaning of some of the vagueness in these text messages. But it's abundantly clear, and today's messages just reinforced it, that there was such extreme political bias on the part of Strzok and Page and personal animus toward Donald Trump, the candidate, and then the president, that these two people should have been nowhere near the investigation. And, you know, some people have said, and I've watched them on other programs, said, well, when Mueller found out, he fired Strzok. Well, he was on the Hillary Clinton case, the lead investigator. Then he jumped to the Trump-Russia case. Then he jumped to the Mueller case. So for 2 years, how much damage did he do before he was caught?
You know, let me ask you about this. And the House Intel has requested the judge to provide the FISA transcript hearings. Greg, I want to talk about the legality of all of this, because we do know that Lindsey Graham and Senator Grassley, they got a chance to look at all 4 FISA applications. That was a sort of like a footnote nobody paid attention to last night with the unredacted memo that they had. As it relates to the intel, I would think that if we ever got a hold of the FISA Corp, considering they're saying the bulk of information to allow this to go forward was based on this phony Hillary Clinton paid for Russian government dossier, I can only and they withheld all this information from the court. I've got to believe that court judge has got to be livid and furious tonight.
Yeah, this is the letter that Devin Nunes has sent today to the presiding judge of the FISA court, requesting not 1 but 4 different hearings and any transcripts to determine the false misrepresentations of fact that were made, allegedly, by the Department of Justice and the FBI during those hearings. I mean, if you just look at the Grassley-Graham letter, it lays out a meticulous case of how the court was misled, deceived, evidence was concealed, but it may be even worse in those transcripts. Leon Panetta was wrong when he said, well, the Intel Committee didn't even interview the judges. I got news for them. They have no authority to do that, but they do have authority, as witnessed by this letter today, to get their hands on the transcripts of the hearings before those FISA judges.
Let me go to Tom Fitton. Tom, in this whole issue of Barack Obama wants to be kept abreast of all of this, and Strzok and Page are preparing what appears to be talking points for President Obama. Wall Street Journal says it was not about the email investigation, but from earlier comments that I saw that you made, you have your doubts about that.
Yeah, well, you pick. It's either about the email investigation or the Russia investigation. Either way, you see President Obama being intensely involved and wanting to know everything about either the Clinton email investigation or Russia investigation. Pick your poison in terms of presidential involvement in these sensitive criminal investigations. Now, I've always wondered why President Obama has skated really free from any serious inquiries about his involvement in the Russia investigations, his knowledge about the dossier, its origins. Remember, he's a politician, too, was running the DNC in part. Did he know about the payments of the DNC and Hillary Clinton and the dossier's use in the Russia investigations and the FISA applications? Did he know about the dossier's use, I would think, to justify unmaskings? These are questions that have to be asked of President Obama.
Absolutely.
This president is being criminally investigated about his communications with the FBI director about a criminal investigation. Why isn't there similar inquiries into what President Obama was doing?
What about Joe DeGeneva? There seems to be some complicity here. Now, if things weren't bad enough that Hillary's paying for Russian, read from the Grassley-Graham memo, Russian government information to be used in an election to lie to the American people, then used as the bulk of information for a FISA warrant, none of it verified. If that's not bad enough, now we have the information. It looks like Sid Vicious Blumenthal and people at the Department of State are complicit in steals some of this phony information that he then coordinates with the Clinton campaign to disseminate to the lazy, overpaid so-called journalists in the media in this country.
Well, here's the most important thing about all of this. This shows that the FBI was bootstrapping all of the information that it was getting, and it was basically a circular firing squad, so that all the information was based on the same information, and that therefore nothing that was being presented to the FISA court was actually verifiable. And let me just say something about Leon Panetta. I saw his comments this weekend where he condemned Chairman Nunes for politicizing intelligence. What a disgraceful comment by a former CIA director. Leon Panetta should be ashamed of himself. He's obviously not reading the papers. What's more, he obviously has not read the April 26, 2017 opinion of the FISA court, in which they accused the FBI of purposely and illegally and unconstitutionally leaking FISA 702 information to private contractors, which is a felony. You've never heard Mr. Panetta say anything about that. You've never heard Mr. Panetta say anything about any of the conduct of John Brennan, the single most political CIA director in history. And Brennan's comments this weekend about all of the stuff that Nunes is doing rank among the most disgusting political comments by any former CIA director in history.
Wow. I want to know Brennan and Clapper. I want to know about the surveillance, unmasking, leaking intelligence, and their potential understanding and knowledge of that. We'll find out in weeks and months ahead. When we come back, a breaking news story on Uranium One. Sara Carter, the informant, testified today. That's next. The informant, who spent years gathering information on the Russia energy and uranium market industry for the FBI, met staff members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, House Oversight, and the House Intelligence Committees. Well, that all happened earlier today, where he gave explosive testimony on his years as an undercover informant, providing information to the FBI on Russian criminal networks that are operating right inside the United States. He also contends in his testimony and his written briefs that the FBI, that Russia attempted to hide their ongoing aid to help sustain Iran's nuclear industry at the time the Obama administration, in fact, approved the sale of 20% of U.S. Uranium mining rights to Russia. Now, we did reach out to Hillary Clinton for a statement. Her spokesman called the informant, quote, a charade and a distraction. Here with more, Fox News contributor broke this story. Sara Carter, lawyer for the FBI informant, Victoria Tunsing. We've got to put this in context here. He worked for the FBI many, many years, and then he worked in particular, if I'm not mistaken, Sara, 6 years on this particular case. Oh, I'm sorry, Victoria, you're shaking your head.
Yes, he was introduced to the FBI, and they immediately sent him over to work with the CIA, which he did for about 15, 20 years. And then when he got involved in the uranium and Russian places, the CIA turned him back over to FBI counterintelligence. So he
finally testifies today. Sara, I want to go to your full report, but I want to remind everybody of important facts here. We don't have enough uranium in this country. And before the CFIUS sign-off, the 9 separate agencies signing off on the Uranium One deal, they knew that Vladimir Putin had operatives in this country that wanted to get a foothold in our uranium industry, and that they were involved in bribery and racketeering and kickbacks and money laundering and all sorts of behavior. They knew all of this even 18 months prior, and they still allowed this to go forward. Tell us what you can now break open tonight.
Well, I think that's important. But what's even more important, Sean, is that they knew that the Russians were still double dealing with Iran. This was the biggest concern for the Republicans at that time. This is the reason why they didn't want the Uranium One deal to go through. And they were screaming mad about it. But everybody tried to assure everyone that Russia was no longer, and the Russians themselves, they were lying about it, that they were no longer dealing with Iran on their nuclear reactors. But at that time, William Campbell, the informant, was actually providing information, and this was months before, that Russia was still dealing with Iran. And this is a major issue. So despite all the information that he provided to the FBI and to their counterintelligence unit, the Obama administration chose to ignore that and move forward with the sale of Uranium One, which was the Canadian mining company.
And the more important point is that he tried to tell people and warn people specifically about everything that was going on. And he was told and has proof and evidence that, in fact, the response was, well, it's not going to be a problem as long as Hillary's in the administration, then as Secretary of State.
Yes, I mean, this is exactly what he was testifying, and I know Victoria will be able to speak more to his testimony today, but this was what he was testifying to those committee staffers who were questioning him, that the Russians were consistently bragging about their relationship with the Clintons and that they would be able to move this through the Obama administration without any trouble. And I know that that's something that he really wanted to bring forward. Look, he's been suffering from cancer. He had his second bout with a cancer diagnosis, and he believed that he wasn't going to make it, and he wanted to ensure that his information became public, and this was the only way he could do it.
All right, Victoria, you were there the entire time today. This is your client. We've been waiting for this testimony for a long time. I know you've had to sift through years of information. What was the reaction, if you can tell us, of these committees, number one, and number two, if you can explain the why it never made sense to allow, when we knew Vladimir Putin's, he had a band of supporters in the country that wanted to get our uranium, and then they're still doing this with Iran that Sara is mentioning. How could this ever happen?
Let me take you back to 2005, because that's when this really started, the Russian plan to take over U.S. uranium piles. That was when, guess what, Bill Clinton, former president, and his multi-gazillionaire friend, Frank Giuffra, traveled to Kazakhstan and bestowed all kinds of praises on the dictator there and ended up, oh my surprise, with uranium mining rights. And it was then, my client is told, that the Russians began to plan strategically how they could take over uranium, particularly in the United States. And one of the key elements of that plan was to get the CFIUS approval to buy uranium-1. It all started in 2005. Yes. And
why didn't they listen to your client? It sounds like he was dumbfounded. He had all this information. He's in the heart of it, sees all the corruption around it. He knows, I assume, that we don't have enough uranium resources on our own. Why didn't anybody listen to him?
He's telling the FBI agents, that's who he's supposed to be working with, and he's telling them about the strategic plan of Putin to take over the uranium industry, and he's writing up these reports and telling them about it. He's also telling them about the corruption in these companies. All of them are, they're all one company, even though they have different names. But they were so confident, Sean, the Russians, that they told Mr. Campbell that with the Clintons' help, it was a shoo-in to get CFIUS approval. And they were so confident in that they even had him open up a new office because they were planning on the kind of business they were going to do as soon as CFIUS approved it.
And also, Sean, Victoria brought up a really good point, and your question, he did approach his FBI handlers. He asked them, why aren't you doing anything about this? Why aren't we arresting people now that we know this is going on? Why is this, uranium-1 deal still going through? And what he was told was, this is all politics. This is about politics. And that's what his FBI handlers told him. So take it from there.
And the FBI director at the time, Robert Mueller, did he know about this?
We don't know. He was Mr. Campbell was told by the FBI that he was being told, and they were taking it upstairs. And he was also told that the President Obama had it in his daily briefing twice. When he was asked today, when Mr. Campbell was asked today, so why did you do all this for so long, and you were losing money and you were sick? He said, because I'm a patriot, and that's what I believe.
And then we got to take everything back to the money, and then the kickbacks, and then the connection to the Clinton Foundation. We're just out of time. I want to thank you both. We will stay on this story as well. It's unbelievable. Thank you both for being with us. When we come back, Judge Jeanine Pirro will weigh in on both these top-breaking stories tonight as Hannity continues. We're glad you are with us. Look, if you look at our top stories tonight, there's a part of me that can't believe all this is happening. So we have the Grassley-Graham memorandum, unredacted, that comes out last night, literally minutes before we start the show. In this, they're saying this dossier is full of Russian government lies. They don't say lies, but Russian government sources, Russians. And then we learn that there are Clinton sycophants also feeding Michael Steele. Now, It's bad enough that they're using the dossier to feed to a liberal media that doesn't do any work or fact-checking on their own. But then it gets even deeper, is that Comey and others use this as the bulk of information, unverified, Hillary Clinton bought and paid for, Russian propaganda full of salacious lies, to get a FISA warrant against an opposition party candidate to prevent him from winning, and then when he does win, to try and unseat a duly elected president.
You know,
I don't even
Sean,
know where to begin with the law here.
If you were to write a script for Hollywood, even they might think that this was a little over the top. But you see, Sean, the frustration that I have, and so many Americans have, is that as we keep hearing these pieces of evidence come out, we say to ourselves, why isn't anything being done? Or is something about to be done? Because as someone who's tried criminal cases for decades, what you do is you put together the pieces of the puzzle. And now we know that President Obama, shock, lied to us when he said, I'm not involved in anything involving the FBI and the DOJ. No investigation am I involved in. And of course, you've got these two FBI lovebirds
do we know what that? Do we know what that text message specifically said?
Sean, it's September of 16. Comey had already closed the Clinton emails in July of 16. So it's either about the setup that they were doing to set up Donald Trump, or someone was saying it's about a meeting with Putin. But here's the bottom line. The president-elect was directly involved with the FBI in identifying their investigations. Now, when she says he wants to know what we're doing, he's not sure. He doesn't want to know about their sex life or that they're having an affair. It's about what they're doing at work as it relates to the FBI. And every trial is a puzzle. The pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And Strzok has to be indicted. McCabe has to be indicted. You've got a lot of people right now who are right on the brink. And, you know, you want to know, what did this president know?
On the brink of, finish that thought.
We're on the brink of indictments coming down. Look, I'm glad Congress is looking into this. I'm very happy. They can make themselves happy. And make no mistake, if it weren't for them, we wouldn't know half of this. But I want a prosecutor looking into this. I want a grand jury impaneled. I want subpoenas. I know the Inspector General is coming out with his report. And as I understand it, there are a lot of FBI agents calling me.
Who would likely be the targets of this investigation? This is an important question.
What is the question?
Who would likely be the main targets of this investigation?
FBI. Strzok, McCabe. I don't know why Bruce Orr is still working. Lisa Page. And there's an interesting character, Priestap. He's a guy in this hierarchy that no one is talking about. What I want to know, Sean, is why is no one talking about him? Is he so clean, or is he cooperating? What's going on?
Judge, what about Comey and Rosenstein?
It's too soon for them yet. Comey needs to be the target of an active criminal investigation. I've said that a million times. Comey lied to the American people. Comey should have been fired the day after he decided that he was the Attorney General.
What about Hillary Clinton?
Well, if the statute of limitations hasn't passed, go for it. Or how about you start looking into the Clinton Foundation?
Wait a minute. They fixed it. When they were writing their exoneration before investigation, it was rigged. And everybody knew that they were rigging it.
That doesn't mean you cannot reopen it, Sean. There's only double jeopardy
but they rigged it so she could stay as the candidate because they thought that she would win and become president. And even Strzok and Page were afraid, oh my gosh, if she wins, she might get mad at us at one point. But then the more important thing is, who knew? How did they possibly take unverified information, withhold from a FISA court judge that it's Hillary Clinton bought and paid for? How do you withhold that kind of information when seeking something as sensitive as a FISA warrant?
Well, you withhold it very simply. Let me explain something to you, Sean. A lot of these FISA judges, people think FISA judges are picked, that they're special for the secret court. No, they're district court judges. And there's something called forum shopping, where someone decides, I want to get this judge or that judge. And maybe if you look at the number of FISA warrants that are approved, it's like 97%. Come on, does that sound like a rubber stamp to you? As if these people are worried they'll be found out? No, Sean.
I know one judge I don't think I'd want to be for, and that's you. Be before. All right. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks,
when we come
Sean.
back, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci's back, and Cheryl Atkinson as we continue straight ahead. Of omission, and today it was on full display. Now, despite the bombshell revelations in the Grassley Graham memo and some pretty damning text messages from FBI officials, lovers Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, well, the mainstream media is utterly silent. Here's the reaction. Founder, managing partner, Skybridge Capital. I'm sorry, Anthony, I'm not Bill Maher. You're not on a liberal show tonight, all right?
Hey, there were Republicans attacking me, Sean. It wasn't liberals. That's the crazy part about it.
That's actually true. You can take heat from all comers.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And the author of The Smear, How Shady Political Operatives and Fake News Controls What You See, What You Think, and How You Vote. The anchor of Full Measure, Cheryl Atkinson, is back with us. All right, Anthony. To me, I think Joe DeGenevieve is right, and I've been saying it. This is the biggest corruption scandal in the history, perhaps, modern-day politics. It is so makes Watergate look like stealing a Snickers bar.
The problem with it, you're calling it that now, but we still got another 10 layers to drill into and rip off more skin. And so once you get really, really deep, Sean, it's absolutely uncontrollable. And so what's going to happen now, they're going to make a pincher movement. You should read the manifesto, the best-selling book by Cheryl Atkinson. She'll describe to you what they're going to do to everybody. They're going to flatten up everybody, dehumanize them. They're going to try to criminalize the process of finding out the criminals. And it's a nightmare for the American people. But I'm glad you're exposing it, Sean. You're doing a big service, a patriotic service. And you're protecting the president who honestly won the election despite all of this nonsense that was happening in the politicization of these agencies.
In many ways, Cheryl, you have been a victim of all of this. It was almost a year ago on this program, we broke the story right here with Sarah Carter and John Solomon, who've done phenomenal work about how, yeah, they got a FISA warrant against Donald Trump. Donald Trump tweets out that, oh, they wiretapped me, and the media went crazy. Turns out everything and much more, we've been literally unpeeling layers of an onion here with real facts and information. The media's gone with a story about Russia-Trump collusion with zero evidence for a year, and they, by omission, don't cover these stories. Why?
Well, just to amend one thing, I don't know that they had a FISA warrant directly on Donald Trump. I haven't seen evidence that they did. They may have used
in the Trump. Right. Go ahead.
They may have used warrantless techniques. There's all kinds of ways. I was told even before Donald Trump announced for office that intel officials, and I was told this by insiders, have sometimes been using bad information to bring to the FISA court to wrap up other people that are the true targets that they can't get a warrant against, but to wrap them up in incidental targeting different ways without maybe a direct warrant.
Isn't that what happened to General Flynn, based on what we know? Isn't that what happened to poor General Flynn?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think from what we know in news reporting and what we've learned since then is that they, under the auspices of listening to a Russian official, the ambassador from Russia to the United States, they then accidentally captured somebody who may have been allegedly their true target and someone that they hoped would lead them to mischief.
The bottom line is you've got one president